He didn't flinch when the gun misfired, didn't blink, didn't even look down. Just cleared the chamber, reloaded, and kept shooting, with a rhythm so exact it was as if time itself paused to watch. It was a Wednesday morning at Grayfield Range in northern Wyoming. Outside, the frost was still melting off truck windshields. Inside, the only sound was steel and fire. Lane 7 was taken. Always was, by 6:45 a.m. No reservations. No exceptions. And yet, no one questioned it. They didn't know his name, didn't know where he came from, or why his targets had tighter clusters than the young SWAT recruits down the line. All they knew was, when that man stepped into Lane 7, the room grew quiet, not from fear, but from respect they hadn't yet learned to articulate. He never spoke first, never stayed after, and never missed a shot. What they didn't know was that beneath that flannel shirt, behind that worn ball cap, stood a legend nobody had the courage, or the clearance, to talk about. And today, someone would finally ask, "Thank you for being here." Sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those, quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now, let's take a closer look at what really happened. His name was written on a clipboard, same as everyone else's, but nobody used it. On the schedule, it just said, L7 reserved. No rank, no initials, no questions. Just those two letters and a permanent claim over Lane 7. At first, Jared Knox thought it was a mistake. He was fresh out of Fort Carson, 25, lean, full of nerves, and assigned to a joint training program with local law enforcement and veterans in Grayfield, Wyoming. Jared was a second-generation Navy CEL. His dad had served in Panama and the Gulf. Combat ran in his bloodline, but he still carried the respectful anxiety of a young man in a room filled with callous fingers and square jaws. The Grayfield Range was more than a firing facility. It was a ritual ground, a cold building of poured concrete and echoes where men worked out ghosts between targets, a place where your name didn't matter unless someone else said it, and Lane 7 belonged to him. The man in the flannel shirt, the one nobody addressed, but everybody noticed. Jared first saw him during week 2. The man showed up precisely at 6:45 a.m., the doors still locked, a styrofoam cup of gas station coffee in hand, and waited by the bench just outside. He wore the same worn jeans, boots with a slight limp in the left heel, and a camo cap with an embroidered wolf barely visible under faded thread. When the doors opened, he'd nod once to the manager, never a word, and walk straight to Lane 7. He carried no range bag. Just a leather sling over one shoulder with a single, aged Colt 1911. It looked like it belonged in a museum. But the way he handled it, that 3 rounds, pause, 2 rounds, pause, the same pattern, every time. A rhythm like breathing. Others noticed but never commented, until Jared did. "Who's he?" Jared asked the range officer one morning, watching from a distance as the man loaded his weapon with a slowness that felt deliberate, reverent. "He's not law enforcement, and he's not on the trainer list." The officer, a thick-bearded veteran named Cole Wesson, lowered his voice. "We call him Hawk. Nobody's really sure what his real name is." "Hawk," Jared repeated, curious. "Is he military?" "Was," Cole replied, eyes fixed on Lane 7. "A long time ago. Some say Recon. Others say something even quieter. But he doesn't brag. Doesn't flash." "Then how do you know?" Jared pushed. Cole just nodded toward the way Hawk's knuckles curved around the grip. "You don't learn that in any civilian course." That day, Jared watched more closely. The way the man cleared jams without glancing. The way he stood, not stiff, but rooted. Not aggressive, but alert. Like someone who had learned to relax with the wolves still circling. And then Jared saw it. When Hawk reached for a fresh magazine, the sleeve of his flannel shirt lifted. For just a second, a faint, triangular tattoo peeked out on his forearm. Ghost, gray against dark skin. Anchor, dagger wings. Jared's stomach dropped. "First Recon," he whispered to himself. He didn't say anything out loud. Didn't need to. But the weight of it stayed with him all day. That symbol was older than he was. Meant something deeper than most CLs in his generation could explain. First Recon wasn't just a unit. It was myth. A legacy of men who did things that were never filed, never praised, never even spoken of again. And now, one of them stood 10 feet away, burning holes through paper targets with a calm so complete it looked like meditation. Later that evening, Jared sat in his truck, looking up archived rosters and unit photos. He didn't find a name, but he did find a story. There was one file, declassified a few years ago, about a mission in the Quethi Unju Nam province in Vietnam. A 7-man team pinned down in a ravine during a nighttime insertion. Enemy numbers were 4-1. No backup, no radio, 2 wounded, and the extraction was impossible. Only one man fought his way up the ridge under cover of darkness, drawing enemy fire to a different flank and clearing a 20-yard path with a knife and sidearm. He carried one comrade on his back, another under his arm, and came back for the rest. Alone. It took 4 hours. And the mission was never publicly acknowledged. The report called the operator Sesjeet HM, no photo, no full name. Just a note. Refused all citations, declined to return to headquarters, transferred out within 72 hours. Jared leaned back, eyes wide. Hawk HM, he couldn't prove it. Not yet, but his gut told him the man in lane 7 wasn't just some old timer with a good aim. He was something else. By week 4, the whispers had started. He doesn't even bring ear protection. He's using iron sights, still gets bullseyes. Did you see how he checked that magazine by sound alone? Some of the local deputies began placing bets on how tight Hawk's grouping would be. One even filmed a segment of him shooting and uploaded it to his private Instagram with the caption, Land 7 Wizard. No scope, no sound, no mercy. The next morning, the man didn't show. Jared noticed first. 645 came and went. The lane sat empty. Cole looked up from his counter, frowned, and said nothing. It wasn't until 7012 that the door opened. And this time he was limping. Worse than usual, jacket zipped to the chin. A long, careful breath before he took his place. He didn't shoot. Not at first. Instead, he stood at the lane, just watching. As if waiting for something. And that's when Jared, for the first time, approached. "Sir," he said carefully, keeping his voice low, respectful. "I hope I'm not out of line, but are you okay?" The man looked over. His eyes were steel gray, not with coldness but with weight, like someone who had seen storms from both sides and learned how to breathe through each. "I'm breathing," he said flatly. Jared hesitated. Just wanted to say I noticed the tattoo. First Recon, right?" The man didn't reply. Instead, he turned slightly, unzipped the coat a few inches, and revealed the full length, the dagger, the anchor, the wings, and beneath it, a Latin phrase. Silentium est fortitudo. Silence is strength. Then he zipped the jacket again and said nothing. Jared nodded and stepped away, pulse racing. That tiny gesture had spoken louder than words. That afternoon, Jared told Cole. "He showed me his ink. Latin phrase underneath." Cole looked up, surprised. "He acknowledged you." "I guess you could call it that." "He ever tell you his name?" "No." Cole leaned in. "Then that means something." The next day, something changed. Instead of shooting alone, Hawk paused midway through his usual sequence. Then, in an unexpected move, he stepped back from lane 7 and motioned toward Jared. "Want to try?" he asked. Jared blinked. "You mean with your Colt?" Hawk nodded. "Only 5 rounds." The others on the range stopped firing, ears perking up behind protective glass. No one had ever been offered that gun. Not once. Jared stepped up, hands slightly trembling. The weight of the Colt was heavy, but balanced. A different feel from the modern polymer he was used to. It felt like holding a story. He aimed. Fired once. Missed slightly left. Fired again. Hit. By the third shot, his hands stopped shaking. 5 rounds later, he stepped back. "Nice weapon," Jared said. Handing it back, Hawk gave the faintest smile. "Weapons just steel. What matters is how you breathe." Then he added something strange. "You'll hit more when you stop trying to win." Later that night, Jared lay awake thinking about that line. He'll hit more when he stops trying to win. What did that mean? It didn't sound like tactical advice. It sounded philosophical. And that's when it hit him. This man wasn't teaching him to shoot. He was teaching him how to exist. Over the next few weeks, Hawk's presence became quieter but more profound. The younger recruits began waiting before entering lane 7, Even if the man hadn't arrived yet, they left him space, time, respect. He never asked for it, but they gave it. And each time Jared passed him, he'd receive a subtle nod. No more, no less. Until one day, Hawk didn't show up again. This time, it wasn't for hours. It was for 3 full days. By day 4, the lane still sat empty. Jared felt something twist in his gut. He asked the range desk if they had a contact for him. No, Cole replied. We've never had his info. Never had to. Jared took it upon himself to drive into town. He stopped at the gas station where he'd seen Hawk fill up once. He showed the clerk a rough description. Older guy, walks with a limp, wears a flannel shirt and cap with a wolf. The clerk nodded. Yeah, name's Elias Holloway. Lives out by Sycamore Creek, past the old grain silo. Jared found the house. It wasn't much, small, 1-story, porch missing a few planks. A wind chime hung crooked near the door. He knocked once. No answer. Then after a long pause, the door opened just a crack. And there he was. Hawk Elias, his eyes sharper now, but ringed with fatigue. You brought my lane coffee, he said with the ghost of a smirk. Jared blinked, realizing he'd been holding a cup from the range cafe. Yeah, just came to check on you. Elias stepped aside. Inside, the house was bare, military Spartan, a bookshelf filled with manuals. A single photo of a unit, 8 men, all younger, all grinning in camo gear. Only 3 of them are still alive, Elias said quietly. Jared didn't ask questions. He just sat down. And for the next hour, the silence between them said more than words ever could. When Elias finally returned to the range a week later, the whole rhythm of the place had shifted. He didn't shoot. He just watched, observed. And when Jared offered him back the Colt one morning, Elias shook his head. No, he said. It's yours now. Jared froze. I can't. I mean, it's yours. Elias leaned in. Respect's not in ownership. It's in what you pass on. And with that, the man turned and walked away. He didn't return the next day, or the one after that. But taped to Lane 7's glass partition was a note, written in the neat, deliberate handwriting of a Recon veteran. This lane reserved until he says otherwise. 2 weeks. No Elias. No flannel jacket in the cold morning wind. No steel-toed boots pacing the concrete floor. No 3-round, 2-round rhythm echoing down Lane 7. At first, people assumed he was traveling, or ill, or just tired. But by day 14, the silence settled differently. He hadn't left a message. No forwarding contact. Just that one note taped to the partition, reserved until he says otherwise. It became a question mark, one they couldn't shake. Jared tried to call around. VA clinics, supply stores, even the sheriff's office. No records, no license in the state system, no emergency contacts listed anywhere. It was as if Elias Holloway had only ever existed in fragments, sightings, rumors, the occasional nod. Never a footprint, never a shadow too long. Then, on the 15th day, a package arrived, no return address. Just Jared's name written by hand on a faded envelope tucked inside a plain cardboard box. Inside, with a Colt 1911, oiled and wrapped in cloth, a folded American flag, crisp and sharp, a 1 coin, brass, weathered, stamped with 4 words on one side. STL here. On the back, scratched lightly with a pocket knife for what's next. Jared didn't cry. Not then. But something cracked open. Something old and quiet. The kind of grief that has nothing to do with tears and everything to do with legacy. He brought the items to the range. Cole stared at the gun for a long time. I haven't seen one this clean since '89, he murmured reverently. What should we do with Lane 7? Jared asked. Cole didn't answer. He just walked over, removed the laminated weekly schedule from the wall, and in permanent marker, wrote across the box labeled L7. Holloway Eternal Hold. And it stayed that way. Weeks passed. The story spread. At first, it was just local whispers. Did you hear? The old guy from the range passed. Someone said he used to be deep recon, like Black Ops level. Then it went online. The footage from that Instagram post was rediscovered, now viewed through a different lens. The comment section filled with stories from other towns. Photos of old men with first Recon tattoos, men like Elias Holloway. Men who never asked for recognition, but left fingerprints on every life they brushed against. The clip reached 3 million views in under 72 hours. But Jared didn't care about the algorithm. He cared about that last message still here. One morning in early March, the wind blew hard from the mountains. Snow had melted just enough to uncover the mud beneath the tires in the lot. And that's when the convoy arrived. 3 Humvees, black, no markings, followed by a fourth, a van with government plates. Out stepped a woman in full dress blues, short silver hair, medals lined across her chest like a quiet storm. She entered Grayfield Range without ceremony. Cole looked up from the desk, startled. "Can I help you?" "Ma'am, I'm not here to shoot," she said. "I'm here to listen." Jared stepped forward, sensing something deeper. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman turned. "I'm Brigadier General Ray Thornton. I trained under Sergeant Elias Holloway in 1982. If not for him, I wouldn't have made it out of Fort Harrison's night trials." She looked around. "This is where he spent his last years." Jared nodded. "He taught us all, without ever saying a word." Thornton's eyes softened. "Sounds like him." She stepped to lane 7, removed her gloves, and placed something on the bench. It was a photograph, 7 soldiers, jungle behind them, mud caked on their boots. In the center, a younger Elias, smiling faintly, eyes already older than his years. "We were ghosts," she said. "Did what nobody could, came home to no parades. But he stayed true." Jared asked softly, "Do you know where he is now?" Thornton nodded. "He was cremated, no headstone per his request. Just ashes scattered into the wind over the Rockies." Jared looked down at the brass coin still in his hand. "Still here." That night, Jared returned home and opened the notebook Elias had once left behind. A single page, handwritten, scrawled in block letters. "YUONEDAUFR duokat comus next JUSTEIS JUSPDNCE JSTLs tan STLAVUTRRSPN." Underneath it, a single sentence. "They taught me to vanish. You'll teach them to remember." Jared closed the book and wept. Not just for Elias, but for every man who carried their war home in silence. For every lesson that never made it into a manual. For every lane 7 that still stood somewhere, reserved for someone nobody had the courage to see. Spring in Wyoming arrives like an apology, soft winds brushing over cold scars, sunlight dragging its feet across forgotten gravel. Lane 7 stood untouched. Even the janitor avoided it. Every Monday morning, Jared still came early. He cleaned the bench, polished the partition, left a cup of coffee on the sill, black, no sugar. Sometimes, he whispered a line he'd never heard aloud, but could somehow feel in his chest. "You taught us how to wait." Because that's what Elias Holloway really did. He taught them to wait, to pause, to see. He taught them that presence wasn't about noise. It was about precision, about honoring something with the way you breathe before pulling the trigger, or before speaking at all. And Jared, once full of urgency and muscle, had changed. He didn't rush his shots anymore, didn't rush his thoughts, didn't rush anything. One afternoon, a boy walked into the range with his father, a sheriff's deputy from a nearby town. The boy pointed at lane 7. "Why's that lane empty?" Cole looked up from his logbook and smiled faintly. "That lane belongs to a man who never missed." The boy pressed. "Is he coming back?" "No," Jared said gently. "But he's still here." The boy frowned. "How?" Jared crouched beside him and pointed to the Colt displayed in a locked shadow box above the lane. "That's his. He gave it to us." The boy looked again and slowly nodded, without knowing why. Because something in the quiet told him there was more than he could understand. On the first Veterans Day after Holloway's passing, the range did something different. There were no speeches, no raffles, no discounts. Only one thing. Lane 7 was open for anyone who had served. One round, one breath, one memory. Men and women came from towns Jared had never heard of. Some in uniform, some in jeans and weathered jackets. One by one, they fired a single shot, then stepped back in silence. By day's end, Lane 7 had seen 63 single rounds, all of them tight, all of them deliberate, none of them spoken about. And taped to the wall beside the Colt, someone had written in thick black marker, "You don't teach this. You absorb it." Years later, Jared would find himself standing outside a different range, in another part of the country. He'd open the door, nod at the clerk, and scan the lanes. And if he saw a man alone, wearing a frayed cap, loading slowly, With rhythm in his hands and silence in his bones, he'd wait. Because sometimes, what looks like an old man is the last standing monument to something the world forgot how to honor. We spend so much time chasing voices that shout, but the ones we truly remember are the ones who never needed to raise theirs. Elias Holloway was never given a parade, never asked for medals, never gave a speech. But in his silence, he taught a generation how to carry honor without needing applause, how to lead without stepping forward, how to pass on a legacy, not through words, but through watching, waiting, and being. So next time you see someone who moves a little slower, speaks a little softer, or says nothing at all, look again. Because some men are not just men. Their entire stories hidden in plain sight. And some lanes are never meant to be filled again. Thank you for spending time with this story. Sometimes, the greatest heroes are the ones we pass by without knowing. But if we slow down, if we pay attention, we can still feel their presence in the spaces they once stood. If this story touched something in you, let us know in the comments. We read every one of them. And if you'd like to hear more quiet stories that echo long after the screen fades, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Until then, stay quiet, stay honorable, stay present.